Hello, and welcome. Joining me from wherever you are joining in the world, whatever time of day or night. In my world, it's sort of midday, and we are having kind of a thunderstorm. So you may actually get, who knows, depending on how the sound is, you may get to be like, hear some of the thunder happening in my world. It's very exciting out there. So welcome. Awesome to see some of your faces and your little names pop up. And I was actually, as I was sitting here preparing for this, I was thinking I was so nervous. I was so nervous. And I realized, I get nervous every time I'm going to say something I think people might disagree with. And I thought, that's so perfect for exactly the topic of this live, because that's basically leadership, is the willingness. I don't want to just dive super right into it, but just to give this little context, right? Leadership, of course, isn't just my way or the highway, but it also is the willingness to maybe say something that other people might disagree with, or to put a stake in the ground, or to say, I think we should go here, or to guide in a way, and then be willing in some way to weather the storms of people saying, yes, no, maybe, I agree, I disagree, I like this, I don't like this. And again, not necessarily to just put blinders on and go well, leadership means I stick to it no matter what, but to be willing to engage, to hear, to feel all that, and to continue to choose. So with that context in mind, of course, we don't get to sit here and have this conversation live, face to face, but I really do. I welcome your comments. I welcome your questions. I welcome any shares that may come from your life about where this either applies or doesn't apply, or how might this apply. And I welcome your disagreement. And I may change my mind, you may change your mind, I don't know. But I have a perspective and I'm gonna bring it. And I do believe that good leadership ultimately includes the willingness to change one's mind based on new experiences, new data, etc. And it has to start somewhere. So I am starting here, and to some extent, for the sake of ease, I'm going to speak to who tends to come and speak to me or work with me. And that is not 100%. I absolutely work with couples that are women dating women, or men dating men, or people dating multiple people, which include men and women. And I do believe that this applies. And a lot of where I'm going to use the term man, in some ways I'm talking about the masculine, because often the men who are coming to me, either in their relationships or in their leadership development, are looking to develop their healthy and sacred masculine. Not always, because there is a flow, but I don't want to digress too much in terms of masculine and feminine for this particular live. And again, this totally applies to women. And one of the reasons I want to talk to men is because men typically put the relational work at the end. So anyway, I'm going to jump into that in just a moment. But what I wanted to say is I welcome your responses. I welcome your questions. Your yes, that's awesome. I totally agree. I never saw it that way. That's an amazing point. I love those comments. But I equally enjoy, I don't know, I see it slightly differently. Or what about this? Have you thought about it this way? So anyway, let's have some sort of engagement and dialogue. And same goes if you're watching the replay. Just give me a little context about what I'm talking about and what you're responding to, so that I can come back and we can have a little tussle. or a mutual appreciation society, however you want to look at it. But please, please, please bring yourself to the conversation. That's my favorite part. As much as I love talking, that's my favorite part. So, with that said, Patrick, that's great. That's actually where I'm going to go now, which is, one of the reasons that really prompted me to want to talk about this is, one piece really is looking at like, these kinds of trainings, these kinds of learnings, the willingness to grow and practice in these realms, I believe truly are the same, and they will apply both directions. However, like Patrick is underscoring for me, I see time and time again that men will say like, well, I'm going to wait to do my relational work. I'm going to wait to do my intimacy work. I need to get this other thing handled. And that typically looks like I need to handle my money. I need to handle my business. I need to handle my purpose. I need to handle, whatever it is that I think I need to handle. Or, men typically, at least in the cultures in which I am steeped, there's a bit of a like, okay, well, I want to get this handled. Hi, Desmond. It's great to see your name and your face. I guess that's not your face, though. That's your little bug's face. And then I'll do the relational intimacy work. And so often that will look like, yeah, well, I can't, like, if I'm choosing, right? I'm going to do a relational or intimacy or relating kind of program, spend my money, spend my time there. Or I could go take this leadership development program and they're promising me, 10 steps to this, or find my purpose here, or, make $1 million this way. And I know I'm exaggerating for kind of the sake of exaggeration, but there is this tendency to look and go like, okay, well, let me do the business development or let me do the leadership development, and this other thing will wait. And there's a couple pieces to that. One is, well, I would say there's 3 things I want to say right off the bat. So one is, there is no later. There is no after. In some sense, of course, we have to choose and we do have to prioritize and what have you, but there is no after. Is that you're either doing the work now or you're not doing it. At some point you may do it and then you'll be doing it, but there is no later. And especially in terms of relational intimacy, this is not to say like if you don't go get your relational work handled right now, you're doomed for good. But this piece of, well, I'm going to put my relationship on the back burner, or I'm just going to handle that later. Like there really is no later. You're in it now or you're not in it. And then there's also this piece, which is that it distinctly transfers over. And while it is true that there's some realm in which if you took a fantastic leadership development program and you truly translated it over to your intimacy work, it would translate. But usually that's not talked about in the realm of leadership. It's not really talked about, especially for men, the way in which this then can translate into your intimate relationships. And again, I am mostly speaking to heterosexual relationships, and that's a lot of the people that I end up working with. So then the other piece of that is that consistently, there's a couple things that I hear, but one is that the men who come and either work with me or do the programs that I lead with John Wineland, I would say across the board, and also actually this was true when I was teaching more authentic relating work as well, like more purely authentic relating work. But they'd come and they'd say like, oh, I thought I was working on my marriage, my intimate relationship, my communication skills, like how to pick up women. I thought that's what I was working on. And actually, not only did I get that, but I learned how to lead my team better. I became a better boss. My company made more money. I discovered what my purpose was. Like all these other things happen. And there's this dramatic correlation actually between engaging in that relational realm, especially in the realm of intimacy, but it's relational in all its facets, that capacity to communicate, to listen, to ask questions, to, true listening, I would say, does require this, but that willingness to actually receive what's being said, to hear it in its fullest sense, and then be able to respond, to guide, translates directly into what we might call, the work of leadership development, or building your business, or discovering your purpose. Like guaranteed that if we go down to the deeper level, not necessarily, again, what your girlfriend, your wife, your intimate partner is saying, because she may or may not have done her work to get down to the deeper level. So not necessarily what she's saying on the surface or her complaints about you, but if you actually go underneath to what's truly she's attempting to communicate, or if she knew how to say better, she would be asking for, what she is calling for you from you is exactly what the world is calling for from you. Is exactly, if you could really dive down underneath, is where you will find your deepest purpose, is how you will serve, whether it's in some altruistic serve the world sort of way, how you will serve in your business, how you will serve in your company, your actual capacity to lead a team, to be a manager, to be a boss, to be the CEO, to see what your company or the company that you work for actually needs. All of those are absolutely directly related to, and actually I would say this goes whether you have an intimate partner, a wife, a girlfriend, like one specific person, or again, multiple partners, or if you're dating. I guarantee the women that you're dating may not, either because of their own level of consciousness or just because there's not an opening for it in the dating world, they may not be saying to you or giving you feedback or reflection directly. But what you are getting from those women is the absolute direct reflection of what will serve you in your purpose, leadership, business development, leading a team, being a manager, all of those areas. And what is this is the place where, I am biased. However, if you can lead in your relationship, you can lead anywhere. And the same is not directly true. So while all the skills that you might learn in a leadership development program, or absolutely the skills that you learn to manage your team or to lead your company can translate into your intimate relationship, it is not the same direct correlation. But as a man, in a heterosexual, relatively heteronormative relationship, your capacity to actually lead your relationship, to guide in that way, to meet the woman that you're with, if you can do that with any level of grace or ease or humor or strength or solidity or stability, you will absolutely be able to do that in the world. And if you're a man watching this, in all likelihood, if you've done any of this work, you're laughing a little bit because you're like, oh yeah, like the leading over here in my team at work, the company that I run, the team that I manage, my purpose in life, like this is probably, 10 times easier than doing that with my woman, my wife, my girlfriend, my intimate partner. And so this investment, this is why I said, if you actually look at doing your relational or your intimacy work, this is the best, this is the most direct, this is the most effective, this is the highest leverage point you could ever make on actually your leadership development. Because these skills, absolutely, they translate directly over, and this is the hardest realm to do it in, bar none. And that's true for all of us. I'm not just saying that that's true for men, but that is true for all of us. All the things that are going to come up in our relationships, in our intimacy, in relating in general, and that's always going to be the trickiest point. So I'm going to pause here for a minute. I did see a couple things come through. Patrick said, the ability to do relationship well feeds directly into business success. Yes, thank you, Patrick, for being a man's voice to underscore what I'm saying. And I know, just because I know Patrick, like I know that he has seen this directly. So it may be easy sometimes to dismiss this and say like, well, number one, you're a woman, you don't know. To that, I would simply say that first of all, this correlates to the masculine in all humans. And I'm not going to go down that path on this live just because I can talk about that for hours and hours all on its own. And so I've seen this in my own life, is my capacity to build these skills in my relating and how I lead directly correlates. But also I have been working with people in this domain for almost 20 years. And I started working with men. That's the area that I started working in the Authentic Man program. And like I said at the very beginning, to a man, so men were coming to the Authentic Man program specifically to up level, to get better at, to deepen, however you want to say it, their relationships with women. That was the tagline. That was the direct thing that we were saying. We will help you with your relationships with women. And I mean, man after man after man, I cannot tell you how many men, like, you know, it was maybe 100% didn't say it, but of the men that I spoke to afterwards, so many of them said what I got was so much more, and that it came directly. It wasn't that we sort of hooked men in about their relationships with women and then did leadership development, you know, like snuck it in. We had them directly relating to real live women and getting feedback from women about how attracted the women were to them, about how drawn they were, about what it felt like to be approached by them, about what their conversations were like. They were getting feedback, and all of these men would come out afterwards and say, holy shit, all of this is applicable in my job that I have for a company. All of this is applicable for the team that I manage. This directly correlated to me understanding what my purpose in the world is. This, like, I came into this specifically around relating to women. I came out and I know what I want to do with my business. These things relate directly. And like I was saying at the beginning, and like Patrick underscored for me, is that there's a tendency, and it's the masculine tendency, again, in all of us. The masculine tendency is, I don't know that I would actually say it's away from relationship, but the masculine tendency is towards more and more simplicity. And that tends to be fewer and fewer people, emotions, you know, it's less complexity. And so it's like, I would rather go do leadership development than work on my relationship. So that's the masculine in all of us. Also, culturally, men and the way that men are raised and what the culture tells us and all of these pieces lead into that also men or males have a tendency to both again, kind of put relating, intimacy, relational work towards the last, to like, want to lean away from that, just seems kind of messy and sticky, and maybe it'll just handle itself. And also have a tendency, they're happening simultaneously, and then they kind of feed off each other to go like, oh, like leadership development, or, you know, business development, or I don't know, whatever all those programs are over there. Like, not only does that seem easier than this kind of sticky, messy realm of relational and intimacy work, but also like, well, that will probably make me more money, or it'll handle my figuring out what my purpose is in the world, or what I'm supposed to do with my business, or, and men are so much taught that they need to handle those things. And often they think that that's actually what they need to do for their relationship. Well, if I just made enough money, then my relationship would be easier. Like if I just figured out my purpose, then my woman would stop complaining. If I just like if I could just get my business to a certain level, well, then I would have the time to focus on my relationship. All of these pieces. And so it's the first of the part of which is that's not really true. Like there is that these are false beliefs. These are illusions of freedom. And we know, I mean, this again is putting a little bit of a stereotype, but we know that there's this that there is this thing that happens, which is like, sorry, baby, like gotta go handle the business. And then the relationship really suffers, and often to the point that the relationship itself cannot survive. And at the same time, and not just for a woman in a relationship. I mean, it's really happened. This thing that men, I don't want to be blaming men for it. It's that men are taught, but then men do. And I'm not saying that women aren't also taught this and feed into this in their own way. That's just a live for another time. I really want to speak to men, partly because I see men hurting so much around this. So that thing of like, if I just got to go handle this and then I'll figure out the relationship, actually drains men as well. And it drains the life out of them, and the aliveness, the capacity to actually find life enjoyable. So I'm not saying that going and doing the relational intimacy work is easy, or that it's like, you're going to go do that and then you're going to feel alive, men. No, I don't know that's, I'm not necessarily trying to say that. I think that would be, that would be sort of a bait and switch. However, doing what I would call leadership development, but at the level of relational and intimacy work, will provide actually that juice for life. It may be hard, it may be challenging, you may want to throw in the towel, but that place, doing the work at that level, is actually what makes life worth living. And it will absolutely give you the skills that you're also looking for when you want to go do that new business development course, that new leadership development course. You will get them over here. And that goes back to the piece I was saying, which is like guaranteed. If you can find the place where actually leading your relationship, or guiding, being, how do I want to say this? Taking leadership in your relationship, or taking leadership with your partner, your woman, your girlfriend, your wife, your partners, if you can find the place where that becomes enjoyable, or where you can find the life in that, or where you can work with what comes up when that is not easy, then all of this becomes a piece of cake. Because none of this, the team that you manage at work, the business that you're trying to run, the money you're trying to make, like none of that is as hard. None of that is as hard as the leadership of your relationship, of your family, of the intimate realm of your life. That will always, always, always take the most skill, the most stability, the most inner, I want to say confidence, but that's the wrong word, but the most inner stability. And by that, I don't mean like hunker down and just, weather the storm. I'm going to come to that in a minute. But that kind of inner flexible stability that it takes to actually be in the realm and to be a leader in the realm of your relationship and your intimate life. That will always be the most challenging place. And so then, you'll go, you'll be like, oh, leading this team at work, like seeing the vision for my company, looking at what do I need to do as the next thing to actually reach my financial goals, like all of that becomes easier. And not only did I used to hear this when I was leading the Authentic Man program, 2015, 12 years ago. But John Wineland and I, when we teach together, we also hear this. We teach a 7-month-long program called the Relationship Training Salon. And men regularly come out of that and they're like, holy fuck, I had no idea what I was going to get out of that program. I thought it was just going to be in the realm of sex or intimacy or, tussling with the feminine, like in some sort of almost airy-fairy realm. Like consistently, men actually get clarity on their purpose. They get clarity on how to lead in their job at work. They get, all of that becomes so much easier because they're not only having our guidance, but they're receiving regular, clear reflection from women and the feminine through the program that dramatically, like clearly and dramatically relates to these other areas of their life that they had no idea they were going to be working on in the program. Jenna said, I know in my bones what you're saying is true. As a woman, I want the men in my life, whether lovers or not, to be enlivened by life. A burdened man is a resourceless, parched man, one devoid of inner intimacy or self-connection. Yeah, so this is a tricky point because the masculine in all of us, when it is just always going to default to burden. How we work with that ultimately is what it will mean whether we are burdened in our life or not. So how we work with, and again, this is man or woman, the masculine in us will always be burdened by life. Like I have too much to do. Everyone always wants something from me. No. That's just the masculine in all of us. Men, women, however you identify, that's the masculine in all of us. And there's also a cultural overlap on men and males to that realm of life. And it's not just that being engaged in the relational and intimate realm is where then what Jenna's talking about in terms of being resourced or nourished comes from, although it's a big part of it. But coming at leadership development from that lens makes all of it more alive. So thank you, Jenna. Tamara said, if I made enough money, I will get the perfect woman for me. Totally. And again, we can kind of laugh at it, but actually, there's the woman, and these are all cultural. They're cultural stereotypes and they're not true. And they're stereotypes for a reason. I mean, I see men and women every single fucking day. I talk to men and women who say these things and they're like, I know this isn't true, but, and that's the shadow part. It's not to pretend that we don't have them, but to be able to see them consciously. So women are like, when I have a baby, then my life will work. And it's like, yeah, that's exactly just the corollary that men have that drives them. It's like, when I find my purpose, when I make enough money, when I, then this other thing will magically happen. It just doesn't work that way. But again, that's alive for another time. Patrick said, the masculine in me just wants to get it done, whatever it is, completely unrelated to everyone and anyone around me. I get constant feedback on the impact of that tendency from my partner, for which I'm eternally grateful. It's awesome. You have such a great partner, Patrick. And it's true. Again, the masculine in all of us is like, when is this going to be done? And if I could just do it alone, that would be the easiest and the most efficient, and then it could be done, and then we could be done. And that's the masculine in all of us. And again, I think there are shifts both, culturally and possibly biologically. I don't really know where we're headed as a species, but I see shifts, not just in terms of men being able to get in touch with their feminine, but truly where males and where females and where, what all this means biologically, where we all live on that spectrum. However, I want to speak to, because I see, there's a lot of men who are very masculine, and there's a lot of women who are very feminine. And it doesn't mean we can't have great capacity in, as women in the masculine realm or as men in the feminine realm. And it's useful to be able to understand these dynamics so that we can work artfully with kind of the truth of who we are. So, I happen to know Patrick. He's like a super masculine dude. And so he's going to have that tendency. And not only, now it might look like he's super efficient, he gets a lot done and his business succeeds. It actually, I guarantee, and I think I can say this because he and I know each other, but I don't know his business. So I'm not but I guarantee that even though he's super successful and efficient and gets shit done, his tendency towards just wanting to do it alone and have it done is actually impacting his bottom line. And so it's amazing then that he has this partner who will reflect in the intimate realm what the impact of that is, because I guarantee there's a way that that's impacting him as a leader and his business and his bottom line. And although at the outset it might seem like this is less efficient, or I don't know how this is going to work, I guarantee being able to make that bridge will actually make him, and I'm sure already has, because he is a relatively well integrated man, already has had a dramatic impact on him as a leader, not just of men, but of his, the team, in his intimate relationship, like in his business and in his bottom line. Tamara said nothingness and probably tagged John Wineland. Absolutely. I mean, he and I have trained somewhat similarly, and we also teach together. And I've just worked with men long enough to see this tendency. And I'm aware of that tendency in the masculine in me as well. Patrick said, my relational abilities totally impact my business success. Yeah, 100%. And I hear it time and time again. I mean, it's super awesome to have that coming real time as I talk, but I see it time and time and time again. So the other piece, there were two pieces that I heard Jenna speak to in hers, which is this desire for the men in her life to feel enlivened. Now, men don't know this. I think they just hear it's not good enough. And they're like, I need to make more money, or I need a better purpose, or I need to make her life better, or some complaint, rah, 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 she, the big she, nah, 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 nah. And he's like, gotta buckle down and, do more all on my own better. And so that's the like enlivened part and the burdened part. The other part is, and this is so tricky because this hooks right into that, but I'm sure that as men, you do hear sort of the cultural conversation. And then I'll say, again, women that I speak to privately, women who come to my programs, the women who come to the relationship salon with John and I, chronically, really the desire. And again, there's a whole other live to do about, for the women on their side, why they're not evoking leadership from men. But right now I want to speak to men just so you can hear it. This desire to be led well is so overwhelmingly what I hear. Like, please, I want in my relationship to be in relationship with a man who will lead me well. And so again, this place of where that becomes this leadership development, and where when you can learn to navigate what that looks like in your intimate relationship, it will directly correlate to leadership everywhere else in your life. So speaking a little bit to what does leadership mean? And leadership, again, this is like a little bit abstract. We hear this and we're like, but what the fuck does that even mean? Is this idea is that leadership is about who we be so much more than what we do. So most, again, there are some fantastic leadership development programs out there. I don't mean to knock all that realm of work. It's just that the majority of, business development or leadership development, they're going to work on, what do you do? What do you do in this scenario? How do you do this? How do you make more money? How do you, scale your business? What do you do? And when you get into the realm of relationship and intimacy, again, there's actually a lot of work out there that'll be like, what do you do? Like, this is the trick, this is the tip, this is what do you do? But any relational intimacy work that is worth its salt will focus far more on who do you be. And that is the direct link to leadership in all other areas of your life, because leadership, no matter what we're talking about, is about who you be. I am actually going to do a whole nother live about this, because I I actually get this question from men and women a lot, which is like, how does this relate to codependency? So I want to really speak to that. But I was frantically scribbling notes in the shower the other day because I have these great little waterproof, notepads. And so I'm always in the shower, like scribbling myself notes that are almost intelligible later. But one of them was really this idea of like codependency, but this is true about anything, is a come from. It's actually about who we're being, not what we're doing. And that becomes dramatically clear when we are working directly through the lens of relationship and intimacy. And that's one of the reasons why I say that actually, and of course I'm biased, and of course I'm going to say you should come and work with me and John. I mean, the relationship and intimacy program that we lead is, I think it's one of the best. I'm sure there are other good programs out there, but he's an absolute master at what he does. I've been teaching this work for 20 years. Like, what we bring together is fucking phenomenal. And so if you want anything in the realm of relationship and intimacy, you should absolutely work with us. But I'm also saying, men especially, if you're kind of in this realm of like, I don't know, maybe I'll wait to do the relationship intimacy work till later, like I'm going to do this leadership development program this year, but like, yeah, I'd love to sign up next year. Like, do the relationship and intimacy program, because I guarantee it will actually link over and teach you what you would learn in your leadership development program. It just will. Because it's about who you be. And we will work on your being. Not only, if you're talking about John and I, but if you dive into this work, regardless of whether you work with us or not, if you dive into this work, that's where you'll be looking. And in our program, it's not just like, oh, we, say things and then you have to take our word at face value. But there's another, 15 to 20 people saying, this is what I would need in order to trust you. This is what I would need in order to follow you anywhere. This is what I would need in order to, that, and they're speaking very personally. So it's not like you need to, but like, this is what I would need in order to want to follow you, which is basically, this is the feedback that you'll just never get from your team at work. They're not listening to you. They're not following you. Everything's going haywire. It's like, why aren't they listening? They would give you, probably in slightly different words, they would give you the same feedback that the women in the program or in some sort of relationship and intimacy program, or your intimate partner, again, who may or may not be saying it in a skilled way, but the feedback and the reflection that they are giving you about why they're not following your leadership, why they don't trust you, is exactly the reason that your clients aren't signing with you, is exactly the reason why your team at work is in chaos, or why they're not doing what you say, but they're not telling you that they're not doing it. It's just not happening, or why your employees are leaving, or why you're needing to fire employees. Like, it looks like you're firing them, but consistently you're hiring the wrong people. It's all the same reasons, the kind of feedback, the kind of reflection that you would actually be able to get if you dove in and fully immersed yourself in a really good relationship intimacy program, like the one that John and I lead. That kind of reflection. What I would need in order to trust you, what I would need in order to follow you, what I would need in order to want to surrender my life to you, what I would need. Actually, what the kind of reflection you would get in that realm is exactly the same kind of thing that your team, your employees, your clients, it's what they need from you as well, guaranteed. Although again, and this is the difference between the being and the doing, the way you may do it at work or with your clients, hopefully, is slightly different than the way that you would in your relationship or your intimate partner. But it's because it's actually about the being. And that's what they're going to call for. Although sometimes it'll show up in terms of your posture or how fast you speak or your capacity to maintain eye contact. Ultimately, though, that all comes back to some way of being. And it's that it shows up in your capacity to do certain things or to express that through your being in certain ways, but it's truly about something in your being. And your being, this is again the other thing about where if you're just going to work on something like leadership development, often they're just going to talk to your mind. And you can understand things without ever truly finding a way to bring them into your being so that you can express them in an embodied way, so that you can live them in an embodied way. And that hasn't really changed your being. It's just like, I know I should be like, or I know I have a thought about this, without actually the capacity to change your being. Tamara said, she laughs when John Wineland says that about the nothingness, because when I get pissed, it helps me. Oh, we're doing nothingness. Okay. It's great. I do think if we can recognize that, then it helps us to be able to bring something different in those moments. So I'm glad it makes you laugh. So this is the other piece about, and this is actually partly where even the questions that I was getting around, how does this relate to codependency, were coming in, because leadership, and it's easier sometimes to see this when we talk about like leadership at work. Leadership isn't just about both what I said at the very beginning, like you just choose a direction and you just stick with it and it's my way or the highway, but neither is it sort of buckling down in a way where I think there has been a misinterpretation of what leadership means in the intimate and relational realm, which is somehow to just take it. As men, especially, to like, she should just be able to do whatever and I should just take it. And we would never say that that's true at work, that like whatever your employees are doing, you should somehow just like, well, good leadership is to just buckle down and take it. But neither is it good leadership to be like, well, you didn't do what I said, so you're fired. So again, this is this place where actually these link together, and looking at like, well, what actually does this mean? How do I move my vision forward, or what I see, whether it's for like what I see for my business, what I see as possible for my team, or what I see is the vision for our relationship, or even for her, that I see something possible for her, and how do I hold that vision and not just buckle down and like take it, or sort of my way or the highway about it, but how does that relate to how am I then going to be no matter what is being brought to me? And that what you do from that place of being might look different. And there will be a point where it's like, oh, this isn't a good fit. I think maybe you're not happy here. I'm not happy. It's actually time for you to find a different job. But that's a really different being than like having no idea why they're not able to follow your direction or do things the way that you think you need to have them done, but sort of getting down to it and being in relationship with it, and then being like, oh, this actually isn't the right fit. What you need and what I need, like, this isn't the right fit. And so, oh, this is how we're going to do this. Same in a relationship. How do you have a vision and then still be able to receive the feedback, the reflection, like, oh, okay, so I need to course correct a little bit. Ultimately it still could be like, oh wow, we're not the right fit for each other. And that can be great leadership. Oh, you're not happy in this relationship. And I'm going to lead us into more happiness actually by saying we shouldn't be together. So it becomes, right, who am I being regardless of how much money I make? Who am I being regardless of what's going on in my business? Who am I being? It should not be dependent on how my employees are responding to me. Like, are they happy with me or are they not happy? Like, and that's just being swayed by the wind. But neither is it just like, it's just this way and nothing ever changes. It made me think about when I was actually sitting down to think about examples around this. So I haven't worked for a company in a very, very long time. But I did. I worked for a really large company when I was in my early 20s called LexisNexis. And there are two stories about that. And one is, I think I had a really good manager. And I could probably point to a lot of things, but I'll say two things specifically about how he was as my boss. And one was that there came a point where I was really bored. And this is partly my own leadership. I actually spoke about this in a different live, like my own coming to what do I need, and neither just, cutting my ties and leaving because I was bored. But I came and I said, look, I want to still work here, but I'm able to get my work done in about half the time. I want to come in at noon on these days. And I went back to school and I started taking art classes. But as a good manager, rather than kind of like, again, it was a huge company. It's a national, if not international company. Even where we were in downtown San Francisco, there were hundreds of employees. And in those companies, it can be very easy to kind of get in like, no, this is what we do. And people have to come in at this time, especially when you're at the level of like administrative assistant. I think that's an easy place to be like, easy come, easy go. But he was actually a really good manager and able to see that I was a good person to keep in the company. And he said, great, let's have some flexibility. That's leadership. What is actually the vision, not just some box about how it should be, and then that it was getting fulfilled in a different way. And the other was, again, around this idea of looking at how did he use me? Because I came in for a review at one point, and I got like shining reviews on in every area of my performance except for somehow I still find this really funny because now I work so much with people, but he basically said, when you don't like people, they know it. And this is like a problem because I had to work with salespeople, and there was a certain way that they, it's like they couldn't know if I thought they were just like a douchebag. But he was able to guide me in a way that was like, look, you're right. This person is a douchebag. He didn't say this, but he was basically, rather than just being like, you need to shape up or ship out, it was like, hey, this is a problem, and let's work together on how we can utilize you, given that you have this issue, which was basically that I couldn't lie energetically. I could pretend, but I just was not very good at it, and I'm still not. So those are two examples of sort of that piece. And then that relates again into this intimate relational realm as a man, especially looking at like, how do I guide? Who am I going to be? Whether, my leadership is just like, thank you, yes, this is exactly right. And I want, I want to be led by you, or like, well, I don't like that restaurant, or like, no, who are you going to be should not be dependent upon how it is received. What you do, how you then express that, how you lead, does need to take into consideration the people around you and how it impacts them. But who you be should not. And that's sort of this tricky realm that I see men get caught up in, is like, but she didn't take my leadership. So, and it's like, yeah, so then you stopped leading. She went, and you were like, oh, I guess I can't lead anymore because she didn't follow, rather than like, oh, so how do I lead given that that's the response? Who am I going to be anyway? And not like, this is who I am, and like my way or the highway, but like, oh, who am I going to be given that this is what's coming towards me? How am I going to take that into consideration, but not just like be swayed by it? And that is why what I said at the beginning, or I've tried to say throughout this, is like, that will always be the harder realm. And if you can master that, and by master, I don't mean like always do it perfectly every time and blah, blah, blah. And this is the other thing, is that I hear men all the time imagine that mastering that means that she'll never be unhappy. That's not the point. The point is not that she should always say yes, or she should never, or she should always be happy. Mastering is that capacity to know who you are and actually be at choice about, who am I going to be? There is absolutely a feminine and a female equivalent to this, and that's another live. But I want to say, as a man and in the masculine, who am I going to be? No matter what she brings or how she responds, that will always be harder. And if you can master that, then this whole realm of like being a CEO, building a company, making money, enrolling clients, leading a team, that's a fucking piece of cake compared to this realm over here, just saying like, let's go to Mexican. I hate Mexican. Like, why watch a man who can lead at work crumble in the face of his wife saying, I hate Mexican? So imagine what he could do with his company, with his business, with his team. Imagine the impact he could have in the world if he was able to master this realm of that his woman brings in response. And that is why I would say that investing in your relational and your intimate work is the highest leverage point, is the best investment you'll ever make in your leadership development. Stephen said, selfship, relationship, and leadership, and 3 different. Only 2 are a journey. The other is communication. It sounds like a really interesting point. I'm not quite sure what that is, but it sounds like a really interesting piece around 2 are a journey and the other is communication. So anyway, if you want to bring more, I think it sounds super interesting. And Tamara said, I promise I think it in my head, not say it that way. I would say go ahead and say it that way. It sounds like a fun tussle. And Patrick said, leading my partner is a dance that changes constantly. Absolutely. Which is the same. I mean, our business, or we can kind of pretend. It's easier to pretend like our business is more static, or our job at work is just more static. It's just easier to pretend. It's not actually true. But this piece of what it means to lead in the world, what it actually means to be leader in the world. And again, this is applicable for men or women, although I would say that most of what I have spoken about today is from the perspective of masculine leadership. We all have that capacity everywhere in our life, all the time, no matter what. And it just happens to be that this dance that Patrick's pointing to with his intimate partner is the perfect practice ground or metaphor where then we can go like, I can apply that everywhere. And the same is true. I mean, we can learn things elsewhere and then bring them back to our relationship. Absolutely, 100%, totally. It's just that this is the most challenging realm for everybody that I've met anyway. I don't want to say everybody, maybe, you're a unicorn and that's not true. But again, having done this for 20 years in a lot of different capacities, I regularly find that this realm of intimate relationship is the most challenging. And so when we build the stamina to do it there, it translates so easily. So the last piece that I want to say about this, and I touched on it a little bit, but in these last few minutes. So again, if you have any comments now, bring them in these next few minutes. Otherwise, I'll come back. If you're watching the replay, I'll absolutely come back to them. And I want to thank you for leaving your comments. But this idea of that your woman is the canary in the coal mine, in a lot of ways, it was what I was speaking to about if you have, I would say this is actually true whether the woman that you're in intimate relationship with is trained in this or not. And again, I'm speaking to a heterosexual relationship. I do think that it translates, and this is so many of the people that come to me that I'm sort of using shorthand for it. Even if you're in an intimate relationship with a woman who hasn't been trained in these kind of dynamics at all, if you take on the training in this realm, you will be able to hear underneath the reflection she's giving you, or the chronic complaints she has, or her unhappiness at a certain level, into what is she really saying? What is this an actual deeper reflection for you? And I would go so far as to say that as a man in a heterosexual relationship, if your woman is chronically unhappy, that should tell you something about your life and your leadership. Now, it might say that your leadership truly is to complete that relationship, but it should tell you something. It is not your fault if she is unhappy. However, if you are choosing to be in relationship with her and she is chronically unhappy, chronically complaining, I'm talking chronically. We all complain sometimes. We're all unhappy sometimes. We're all sad. We are not responsible for each other's emotions. But that chronic, again, there's actually like a feminine and a female corollary that I could talk about in another live. But as a man, taking leadership in your relationship, if your woman is chronically complaining or unhappy, I would say that is the canary in the coal mine of your life. I guarantee that whatever she is chronically unhappy about, chronically complaining about, is pointing to some place where you are abdicating leadership in your life. And so again, you could be like, okay, cool, I'm going to go handle the leadership development part and then hope that this gets handled. Or maybe she's just complaining because I'm not taking leadership in my life. I'm not making enough money. I'm not blah, blah, blah. Maybe. I say if you truly dive in, and not to fix her or to meet the surface level of her complaints, but if you actually dive in a true, to like the true deep work of relationship and intimacy, and are willing to receive the feedback of where you're abdicating leadership in your life, you won't ever need to take a leadership development training program again, because it will tell you that work will tell you, and listening to that will tell you, where are you abdicating leadership in your life? Where are you withholding leadership? Where are you caving? Where are you avoiding? Where you will guarantee tell you that. Again, I am not saying that it is your job to make this woman happy. It might be that your deepest leadership in that relationship is to end the relationship. It might be, and again, it's not even it's not your fault. It's not even your responsibility to fix it, like to do everything. But it might be the deepest leadership to say, like, I can only stay in this relationship if you also go do therapy or go do women's work, or you only work 8 hours a day, or like you can guide the relationship without having to do every step of it. But there is a place that I believe that you're abdicating leadership if she is chronically fatigued, chronically unhappy, chronically complaining. And it's not that she can't take responsibility for that as well. However, you're asking her to take the masculine role if you abdicate that to her. And I guarantee that that does actually link to some area of your life, whether it's your business or your capacity to enroll clients or your leadership on a team, or whatever your role out in the world is, there is a correlation. And once again, if you truly actually, rather than putting the relationship and intimacy work on the back burner and saying, like, I guess there's something out here I should handle, if you really dive into that work, I guarantee it will link right back. And so there's this place, I think, that it's too easy for men to believe, or to just, and I'm not blaming you for this. You're told this, but we can do the work of really looking and saying, it's not my fault, but if I choose to be in a relationship with her, there's some responsibility there, and it is telling me something. What is it telling me? What is it telling me? And to use that as this, kind of the analogy of the canary in the coal mine. So I think it's Daniel, not Danielle, but this is specifically what I started out by saying, which is that it might be that the strongest point of leadership is not to stay with that woman. So if she is a manipulative narcissist, then staying with a chronically unhappy manipulative narcissist, that's not leadership. Stephen said, if a woman is chronically unhappy, then all that can be done is to validate her perspective or feelings. Nothing else should be given unless she wants it. Well, this is a longer conversation. I would say to look at that as, what is this showing me about my life? Where else is this applicable? I guarantee it will show a man who wants to grow in his masculine some area where he can grow in his masculine. If he doesn't, then he doesn't. And that is an absolutely valid choice. Stephen also said, self-ship or ownership is guiding yourself, which is a personal journey. Leadership is guiding others and therefore a journey. Relationship is about relating to each other, which is purely a communication process. I don't know if I 100% agree with that, but I think that there are some interesting pieces in that that definitely weave in with all of these pieces. So yeah, Daniel, you're welcome for the response, because I think that that's really important. It's too easy to see that as then that's his fault, or he's supposed to take responsibility. And this is where that piece around codependency comes up. But then it's very easy, it's easy to go from one pole to the other, which is like, well, that's just codependent, so I'm only going to be responsible for me and she's responsible for her. And then I think there's a loss of relationship. But if a man, again, who's in a heterosexual relationship and he wants to develop his masculine, if he sees something possible and is able to say, you know, in order for me to stay in this relationship, I need X, Y, and Z, and it can have to do with her. Or I hear you complaining chronically about this. I see this as possible, and she chronically isn't willing to follow that. It's his choice about whether he stays or not in that relationship. And I say that that is a direct mirror to his leadership or his abdication of leadership or his willingness to stand for other people elsewhere in his life. So I know that this isn't at its full, maybe wrapped up in a bow point around specifically the canary and the coal mine piece. And for the sake of time, I'm going to wrap up this live for now. And I will post a link to the application for the Relationship and Intimacy Training Program. We still have about 3 spots for men. There's an application and then a conversation, because kind of like I mentioned in every part of this live, this is really, really deep work. And if you want to dive in, it's going to take something. So I believe that as a man, if you're looking for high-level leadership development, there is no deeper place that you can look than actually in relationship and intimacy training. So I'll post a link to that. Check it out. If you're interested, let's have a conversation. Otherwise, you know, I love the dialogue. Thank you for being here. And I love all the dialogue. I love the responses. If you're watching the replay, I hope you also engage in the dialogue, and I'll come back and we can at least have like a written dialogue, such as it is. So thanks again for your attention, for your time, and ciao for now.